Welcome to another edition of Understanding the Symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. This time around, we're going to look at the Temptation of Saint Anthony. So, the Temptation of Saint Anthony is a large altarpiece in the form of a triptych. A triptych is a work of art with 5 panels. There are 3 panels on the interior that we're looking at now, with the wings on the right and left on hinges so that they fold in. And once they fold in, we see the other 2 panels, the outside panels, and they look like this. To understand the Temptation of St. Anthony, we'll use the 5 keys to understanding the symbols of Hieronymus Bosch. And the first one we're going to use is read the Bible. So the first thing you need to know about Hieronymus Bosch is that he was a heretic. And the first thing you need to know about his heresy was that it was based on Matthew 7:12, in everything do to others as you would have them do to you. And while this might seem a pretty scant scripture to base a heresy on, you have to consider that Bosch lived in a world where the religious establishment, the people claiming to represent Jesus, practiced just the opposite. They burned people to death. And in Bosch's lifetime, they had fired up, as it were, the Spanish Inquisition. And so the Spanish Inquisition was moving from town to town, burning witches, homosexuals, and heretics, as well as a couple of thousand Jews during Bosch's lifetime. They were busy doing just the opposite of what Jesus taught. They did not practice do to others as you would have them do to you. In the left panel, he compares the story of Jesus healing the ear of the servant of the high priest, whom Peter cut his ear off in defense of Jesus, but Jesus healed the man. And Bosch is comparing that with the monk who is killing a man. And monks killed men all the time. And in the other panel, we have Jesus receiving mercy. But the only mercy that the church is doling out is strangulation before your execution if you recant. And so Bosch is making that point on the outside panels. The church is doing the exact opposite of what Jesus preached. So we have on the outside the church killing heretics or showing heretics no mercy. And this is contrasted with the life of Jesus, where he heals a sword wound as well as is shown a little comfort and mercy. And mercy is to be rewarded. And so the question becomes, how did the church switch from being the persecuted followers of Jesus to the obvious persecutors? And that's what the inside panels are all about. So we had all that realism on the outside because those things really happened. There were really monks torturing people and executing people, and the life of Jesus is taken at face value. So everything on the outside is real, but on the inside, we're discussing a lot of things that are unspeakable. So they've been hidden in symbols. One more quick thing to notice about the outside panels is notice that the lower section is the modern section. It's the world of Hieronymus Bosch. But he's made that little plank, that bridge between the 2 worlds, between the world of Jesus and the modern world. And we see the same thing on the inside. In the left-hand panel, Bosch has put himself on an actual little bridge, letting you know it's connected. His world is connected with the world of Saint Anthony. In most of the books, They claim that this is Anthony the Great, but it is not. This is Anthony of Padua. Anthony of the Great is floating around. He's really floating around. He's in the water about to stab that dragon. And it's the blood from that dragon in the right-hand panel that's causing the pollution in the water. And that's the sewer they're now all crawling through. But that's Anthony the Great. He's that little tiny, tiny figure because he happened a long, long time ago. And so the farther back you go in the painting is the farther back you go into the history of the world, actually, in this case. But anyway, who we're looking at is Anthony of Padua. Anthony of Padua loved Anthony the Great and named himself after Anthony the Great. He was a very intelligent, highly educated young man that was drawn to the church, and he was so impressed that he went off on a famous missionary journey. And the first thing he did was get sick and be sent home from the missionary journey. But he didn't get back to his home in Portugal. He got sent to the eventually the monastery of St. Francis of Assisi. And St. Francis was so impressed with the young man that he put him in charge of the monastery. And that's when his troubles began. St. Francis of Assisi preached to the animals. And the story on Anthony of Padua was that he preached to fish. He preached to some body of water, and a great school of fish were said to gather at his feet. And that was one of the proofs that he was a holy man. And so we see him in the left panel, but he is being tormented, but he's not being tormented by vicious animals and horrible creatures. He is being tormented by fish. He is being attacked by a fish in armor who is riding a fish, who is slapping him with a fish. Fish are also a sign, a symbol of Jesus, because of the sign of Jonah, which was a large fish. He said, "I will make you fishers of men," famously, and he famously multiplied the loaves and the fishes to feed the multitudes. So if we interpret the fish to be a symbol for Jesus, we can read the torment of Saint Anthony here as he is being tormented by the words of Jesus, how the words of Jesus are used, and that the words of Jesus are now wearing armor and used to inflict pain. And Saint Anthony, all he can do is pray and meditate, but he is laid down on the belly of a big old toad. And this is his conflict. He is in the wrong boat. He is not a fisher of men. In fact, he is being mocked by the proper boat. One of the most important symbols that we run across in the world of Bosch is the frog. He puts them everywhere. What does the frog mean? To understand the frog, we need to read the Bible. And I saw 3 unclean spirits that looked like frogs coming out of the mouths of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. These are demonic spirits that perform signs and go out to the kings of the earth to assemble them for battle on the great day of God the Almighty. So these are the frogs are the teachings of the false prophet and the beast, and they are the ones that turn everyone against God. And this is the same dragon that we see Anthony the Great fighting in that little miniature way in the background, because he fought the original dragon a long time ago. The counterpart of the frog in Bosch symbolism are the large birds. The large birds are the ones qualified to snuff out the false teachings of the beast and the false prophet. So the giant birds are master heretics. And we see a nice giant bird eating a frog as sort of a signature at the bottom of the temptation of St. Anthony. Returning to our story of St. Anthony, we see his sailing ship that's taking him back from his trip to Africa, but he's being guided past the sinking ships because he's sailing true towards that beacon on the hill. And that beacon represents, well, all small fires in Bosch symbolism pretty much indicate Jesus, or say the light of the world, someone who is imitating Jesus. So that could very well be Saint Anthony or Saint Francis of Assisi. Notice that in the left-hand corner we have Saint Anthony being tormented by fish, but in the right-hand corner we have a couple who are happily traveling very comfortably by fish. And so if we interpret the fish to be essentially the teachings of Jesus, and essentially do unto others as you would have done to you, then this is a portrait of a couple who are on a missionary journey. These are heretics. They're riding very comfortably on the word of Jesus, and they're spreading the light to others. Notice that the man is egg-shaped, and an egg is a symbol of metamorphosis or change, and so he is capable of changing himself and bringing change to others. And the because he's so round, it indicates he's also wealthy. He has plenty, and so he is using his wealth in the service of the kingdom and carrying the light on to others. And what else can we tell? Okay, and now I want you to notice what she is wearing. He is focused on the front, very serious. She's sort of looking right at us with one hand in his wallet, I think. But she is riding along. But what's important is she's wearing that white covering and that pink dress. And voila, she appears as the model next to St. Anthony. She is now in profile. Now she is focused. And also I want you to notice that she doesn't have any legs. Anthony's bending a knee. Anthony's bending a knee just about in every picture, but she is not bending a knee. She is concealing her legs. She cannot be accused of bending a knee to the, well, Christian authorities, to the church, while he is at that altar place. Bended knees don't always indicate defeat. They can also be humility. Like on the outside panels, Jesus is bending his knees in both of the portraits. You have to differentiate between the bended knee and the bended knee. And so here we have a bended knee willingly done. So they're both going along, inspired, lifted, energized, carried along by the words of Jesus. And he's wearing a harvester's hat. They're harvesters off to the harvest. So this is a portrait of a dutiful heretic's wife, and she's been given the privilege of playing the part of St. Clare next to St. Anthony. And so our conclusion is she probably commissioned and paid for this painting. Next time on Understanding the Symbols of Hieronymus Bosch, we'll talk about the day when everything went wrong. We'll also identify the couple getting married and why Anthony is turning his back on them, and why Hieronymus Bosch is mocking the flight into Egypt. Anyway, that's it for now. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.